Okay, let's take a look at the final poll results and see what we got. Oh, it swung to the Wildcats. Vol fans, you're not worried. You can't beat the Vols 3 times. That's right. You want to play Kentucky next. All right, interesting. And we do have some Kentucky folks that watch up in the Middlesboro and that area. So right now they're like, we'll remember this. It's going on a message, we're going on a bulletin board. All right, so
I'm impressed. That's an upset to me. I thought Illinois would win.
Yeah.
I'm impressed by Tennessee fans.
I think we just dared them to do it. They
Yeah,
did it, so there we go. Yeah. But that's good. Thank you very much for playing along. We appreciate it. I want to show you now, these are all courtesy of CBB Analytics. It's a group that colleges use, that pro teams use in terms of finding numbers, and it's a lot of charts that are XY graphics. So we'll explain it to you, but it's a great way to visualize how Tennessee stacks up against the foes that are still remaining in the Midwest region, standing between them and their first ever Final Four trip. First, let's take a look at the bracket just to give you a look right here. The Vols road to San Antonio. All right, it's Purdue versus Houston. It's chalk over there. And then it's Tennessee versus either Kentucky or Illinois. Both of those games Friday. And then if Tennessee wins against Kentucky or Illinois, we'll be back here next Sunday doing an Elite Eight preview of the Volunteers, which would be fun. We got to do that a couple of years ago. Let's see. Did they play on a Sunday last year? I'm trying to remember if that was a Sunday. I think it was.
I believe so.
We did one last year. We did it for the Michigan State game, so maybe we could pull them through one of these days. But let's take a look next. Offense versus defense. All right, so this is CBB Analytics. What we got here, offensive rating and defensive rating. Along the bottom is the offense. So better offense, farther to the right. Better defense, that's up and down. So you see Houston's got a better defense than Tennessee. They're higher. Tennessee, better than everybody else there. But look at Tennessee's offense compared to the remaining teams in there, including Houston. In terms of offensive efficiency, Houston much more efficient than Tennessee, even though that Sampson offense, he's more than happy to play you in the 50s and the 60s, the same way Rick Barnes plays. Let's take a look at the next one. Dominant versus dominated. This is interesting. Wins without trailing and losses without ever leading. These are these streaky teams. You look here, in terms of wins without trailing, Houston, 15 times this year they went wire to wire. That's a level of dominance that Tennessee didn't hit. Now you can say that the SEC is a tougher conference. You've got one more team remaining than the Big 12 right now, so I'm not sure about that. But anyway, you've got, in terms of wins without trailing, Tennessee second to Houston, but Houston way up there. In terms of losses without ever leading, teams that fell behind and didn't come back. I mean, Illinois is a team that had plenty of those where they just never even led in the game. So that's up at the top. They had that happen 3 times. Kentucky had it happen a couple times. Again, Houston, they never lost wire to wire. They never trailed an entire game like that. They're a dominant team, or at least they have been against the competition they've played so far. Let's take a look at blown leads versus comebacks. Okay, at the bottom, wins when trailing by 10 points or more. Look at Kentucky. That's the left to right. Kentucky's had 3 of those where they came back when trailing by 10. In terms of losses, when leading by 10, that's the bottom. Purdue has had 4 of those. Illinois has had 3, including against Tennessee. They led Tennessee by 10. That hasn't happened to Tennessee all year long. You haven't lost when leading by 10. Even Houston has had 1, but Tennessee has not. Here's another one. Push it and score it. What you get here? At the bottom are fast break points per 100 possessions. In terms of teams that stylistically are not what you do, that's Kentucky, far right. Left to right is that chart, and far right is Kentucky. They will get it up and down the court. In terms of points scored per 100 possessions, that's top to bottom. And Tennessee is at the bottom. Points per 100 possessions. So in other words, Kentucky on paper, and then the 2 games when you play them, not the best matchup necessarily. And then last, let's look at defensive strengths. Steal percentage versus block percentage. In terms of steals, that is left to right. Tennessee second only to Houston. In terms of block percentage, that is top to bottom. Tennessee up there with Houston. So when you look at these charts, I think you see one, Houston's awfully darn good.
Yeah.
I mean, Houston is, 15 times they've won wire to wire this year. They're a more dominant team. It became, when the brackets came out, there was a lot of talk of, well, we're the same as Houston. Stylistically, in terms of playing in the 50s and 60s and defense first, I think you are very similar to Houston. Otherwise, Houston, whether they're in a different conference or not, they're more dominant than Tennessee is, and they have been. But you look at last night, doesn't mean you can't lose. Gonzaga almost got them. I just think when you look at that, it shows you that Tennessee's offense is where your biggest concerns are. No surprise there.
Right.
I think it shows you that Kentucky, to me, on paper and in the two games we've seen, may not be your best matchup. And I think it shows you that Houston's going to be tougher than some people think if you wind up facing them in the next round. Your reactions to what you saw, any disagreements with the way I interpret that?
No, I would say that Houston is, they do a lot of what Rick Barnes does, Kelvin Sampson does, but with players built for that, as opposed to players who are built for playing in space. I mean, Igor Milicic is built to play in space. Chaz is built to play in space. So they have recruited to that. They're not very deep, but they are dominant at what they do. The key is you have to find something like Mark Few and Gonzaga did last night. They put them in a half-court trap, and Houston could not handle it. They also missed. They missed.
It was bad. It was worse than UCLA versus Tennessee.
Much
It was ugly.
worse. And they don't hit free throws away from home either. That's another big thing that can matter in the NCAA tournament because you're always away from home.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting
I think, and Tennessee is hitting their free throws right now. But Houston is better at doing the thing that Tennessee's trying to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're a concerning team, but Kelvin Sampson usually goes home early in the tournament.
And without even getting into quad one wins, which is obviously important, you see why Houston was number one seed based on those charts.
Yeah,
and
level
not
of dominance.
trailing in 15 games.
Yeah.
You also see why Kentucky can be so hard to beat. I mean, they can fall behind by 10 points and come back and win. And a lot of teams don't have that ability the same way they did. Yeah. Purdue's playing good, but I mean, I think I would still rather play Illinois. Looking at all this stuff, that's who I would rather play out of those teams.
Well, Purdue's beaten you through the last 3 times you've seen them, and 2 of those are in the NCAA tournament. I'd just as soon avoid Purdue, I think.
Right.
Yeah, although your numbers tell me I'll take my shot against Purdue in the Elite Eight this time with no Zach Edey there compared to everything Houston's done.
Oh, yes,
this season.
absolutely.
But, the Kentucky matchup, it's been a question because of the way those 2 games went, and some of those numbers that you showed do indicate obvious differences in what they're doing. I'm sure Tennessee staff, though, is already planning, well, we're going to have either Kentucky or Illinois. They'll have almost a full week to get ready for Kentucky to look at the previous 2 games, what needs to change from those 2 games to make sure you don't get the same result on Friday. Again, if it's Kentucky. So I'd rather see.
Hang on.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We'll hang on. Let's talk more about Kentucky, Illinois in the next segment. We got a couple more numbers to talk to, and we'll tell you a couple more things that stood out from those first 2 games against the Wildcats. That's next. Come on back on the Sports Force.